Tonight we're going to cover, our videotape number 3 is all about dinosaurs. Where do they fit into the Bible? This fellow from National Geographic says, no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. Well, now hold on a minute. Does he know that, or does he think that? In order to know that, wouldn't he have to know everybody that ever lived? And in seminar part 2, we talked about the firmament that was above the atmosphere. Now, during this time, something very strange would happen to the reptiles, because reptiles never stop growing. Reptiles never stop growing. So before the flood came, when the reptiles lived to be 900 years old, they would get to be really big. Dinosaurs were just big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve before the flood came. Some of the scoffers have said, man, if it was stormy seas for a whole year, it'd kill everybody on the ark. And he only had to bring 2 of every sort, not 2 of every species. So that's where people get all confused about this. God told Noah to bring them after their kind, after their kind, after their kind, 2 of every sort. 7 of some, of course. Just 2 generic animals of each kind, and only those in whose nostrils was the breath of life, and only those on dry land. Noah didn't have to bring any fish. They had plenty of water outside. And he didn't have to bring any bugs, by the way, because bugs don't have nostrils. They breathe through their skin, through spiracles. And he brought just 2 of the generic dog kind. Probably the horse and the zebra had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. Did you know there's only about 8,000 basic kinds of animals in the world? And how big was the ark anyway? According to the Big Bang Theory, 20 billion years ago, nothing exploded and produced everything. And 4.6 billion years ago, the earth cooled down, it rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. One skeptic said to me one time, he said, Hovind, did you realize there are hundreds of kinds of dogs in the world? I said, yes, sir, you're right about that. He said, do you think all those dogs came from just 2 dogs on Noah's Ark? I said, sir, would you look at what you believe? You believe all the dogs in the world came from a rock. And today, there are 270 surviving flood legends. The Hawaiian have a legend that says, long after the death of Kunihana, the first man, the world became a wicked, terrible place to live. There was one good man left. His name was Nu'u. He made a great canoe with a house on it and filled it with animals. The waters came up over all the earth and killed all the people. Only Nu'u and his family were saved. The Chinese have a legend called the Hai King Classic, probably one of the oldest stories in the world. The Hai King Classic says Fu Hai is the father of the Chinese civilization. The story says Fu Hai, his wife, 3 sons and 3 daughters, escaped a great flood. He and his family were the only people alive on earth. After the flood, they repopulated the world. Interesting. Sounds kind of like the Bible story, doesn't it? The Toltec Indians in Mexico have a legend that says the first world lasted 1,716 years and was destroyed by a great flood. Only one family named Coxcox survived. Why would there be 270 flood legends? And if you look at the country of Turkey today, you'll find on the far right-hand side a mountain called Mount Ararat. On a Turkish map, it's called No Ungumshi, which means Noah's big boat in Turkish. There's a sign, No Ungumshi, 5 kilometers this way. They say it collapsed, folded in after it got old and splayed out to the side. Ships kind of fold out to the side as they wear out. So it's much wider than it used to be. They found iron rivets all over that region. One of the people said, well, anytime mud flows around an object, it makes that shape. That's just a mud flow. Yes, but when mud flows around an object, the round side is on the uphill side and the pointed side is on the downhill side, and this one is backwards. This is not a mud flow. That's his opinion, but that's certainly not a scientific statement. It's about 2/3 the size of the Titanic. In that region, they have so far found, I believe, 12 giant stones. These stones weigh 9,000 pounds, and they have holes drilled through the top. Apparently, this was to hold a rock, to hold a rope, to hang this rock over the side of the boat. It's what's called a drogue stone. The purpose of a drogue stone is to keep the boat stabilized in stormy weather. Sort of like a shock absorber to the water. As the waves hit you, the boat slowly moves instead of violently reacting to the waves. It keeps you more stable with a bunch of rocks hanging all over the boat. Plus, if it really gets windy, the wind will turn the boat and you'll be perpendicular to the waves because the rocks are going to drag behind you, and now you can't capsize. One atheist I debated, he's a former preacher turned atheist. He said, you can't have a boat that big because if you get over 300 feet long, when the waves come up, the boat bends in the middle and it breaks. Well, first place, a lot of people have built boats over 300 feet long. The Chinese had a bunch of them way over 300 feet long that sailed just fine. Plus, if Noah's Ark had a moon pool, that would solve all the problems too. There are several ways to solve this problem. A moon pool is a hole in the floor with walls built up inside, and when you go over the waves, the water comes up and down inside that hole. So, what happened to the dinosaurs? I mean, if the Bible is true and dinosaurs were on the ark, what happened to them? That question of what happened to the dinosaurs is used in public schools all over the world to trigger kids to start a conversation about evolution, to teach them the evolution theory. And they'll tell the kids, maybe a meteor struck the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago, made an iridium layer all over the world, and killed all the dinosaurs. Anyway, so what made the dinosaurs go extinct anyway? Hey, they are asking the wrong question. The question is not what made them go extinct. The question is, did they go extinct? I think dinosaurs had two basic problems after the flood. Number one, they faced major climate changes where they couldn't live as long, and so some of the big species simply went extinct. They couldn't survive. Second problem they had was probably worse. People were hunting them. In those days, they called them dragons. They would kill them for meat. There'd be a lot of hamburger in one brachiosaurus. You could feed the village for a while, couldn't you? They killed them because they were a menace or for medicine. You know, it's amazing how many ancient recipes for medicines call for dragon saliva or dragon bones to be ground up and put in these things. Just like it's, you know, just go out and get a dragon and put some of the bones. Just like it's normal. You know, everybody does that, don't you know? They used to call them dragons because the word dinosaur wasn't even invented till 1841. So all through history, they're known as dragons. The word dragon is found in the Bible 35 times. They didn't call them dinosaur. The word didn't exist. But as the population of people began to grow after the flood, the population of dragons began to go down. Nobody wants to live next door to a dragon. Hey, the same thing happened right here in Pensacola, Florida. How many grizzly bears are roaming around Escambia County right now? 0. How many were there 500 years ago, you think? Probably a lot of them, right? Well, what happened? You see, when people move into an area and civilize it, the big ferocious animals are driven off or killed off, right? If it came on the evening news tonight that there were 5 grizzly bears roaming around Escambia County, do you know what would happen by 6 o'clock in the morning? Every redneck in 3 counties would be out there with a rifle trying to shoot one. And whoever could shoot the biggest one would be the hero. They'd put his picture in the paper, you know, I shot the grizzly bear and saved the village. That's exactly what would happen. And that's what happened to the dragons. Man, if you could kill a dragon, you'd be a hero. And there are all sorts of stories of people killing these dragons. Gilgamesh is famous for slaying a dragon. Some Chinese guy named Yu surveyed the land of China, and according to the story, he built channels to drain the water off to the sea to make the land livable again, and many snakes and dragons were driven from the marshlands. Just, you got to drive the dragons off before you can, farm the lands, like it's part of the procedure. The Babylonian god Marduk is shown pictured here on top of a fire-breathing dragon. St. George is famous for slaying a dragon in 275 AD. Beowulf is famous for killing dragons. He was finally killed by a dragon when he was 88 years old. But the Beowulf story, when they translate it to modern English, says, Beowulf killed Grendel the dragon by pulling off one of its arms, and the creature bled to death. What a strange story. Pulled off his arm. Well, most folks that study the T-Rex will tell you his front arms were pretty weak and puny. And I don't know if this was the dragon they're talking about or not, but probably if you could ever get a way to get a hold of it, you could probably jerk one of his arms off. Siegfried is famous for slaying the dragon Fafnir, famous Norwegian hero from 1,000 years ago. Marco Polo lived in China for 17 years. When he came back, he reported, the emperor is raising dragons to pull chariots in his parades. If you go to Ica, Peru, they've got the driest desert in the world down there. It's only rained once or twice in 400 years. Not a good place for a garden. When the Spanish came across that area in 1570s, they found white lines going across this desert. They said, obviously man-made lines. Why would somebody make this white line? It goes for miles across the desert. Nobody knew what these white lines were until they got airplanes. And they realized these are actually giant pictures. How many have ever heard of those before? They're called the Nazca lines down in Peru. Amazing. When they came across there in 1571, the Spanish found stones with strange animals carved on them. They'd never seen an animal like that, so they brought the stones back to the King of Spain and said, what are these? He said, I don't know. They're called the Nazca burial stones. I have 3 of them in my museum here in Pensacola. I have 2 of them on the table with me tonight. One is a replica. I have 3 originals, though. These Nazca burial stones that are found down there have dinosaurs and humans together. Of the thousands of stones that were found, about 500 contain dinosaurs and humans together. They show all sorts of things like heart surgery, brain surgery, strange things on these stones. Dr. Baugh has two in Texas. Don Patton has one. Dennis Swift has two, I think, and we have three. There's only 15 in the whole United States. 3 of them right here in Pensacola. Come on down and see our world-famous, small right now, but we're getting there, museum. We'll take over to Smithsonian here one day. And Tom Willett's a friend of mine. He went down there and spent 8 months studying the Ica stones. Dennis Swift is a pastor in Oregon. He goes down there every year, talks to Dr. DeCara. Down in Acamburo, Mexico. You're from Mexico, right, brother missionary? You ever been to Acamburo? You know where that's at? Go to Mexico City, turn right, go about an hour and a half. Middle of nowhere. You've been to Mexico City? Okay, thank you, sir. That's good. And you're his son. Okay, amen. In Acamburo, Mexico, they found 56,000 ceramic figurines of dinosaurs and people together. The people in the town are real quiet about it, because it just really upsets all the theories about evolution. There are stories of octopus actually pulling ships underwater. You say, come on, octopus never get that big. Oh, they get pretty big. This one washed up on the beach in St. Augustine, Florida, 100 years ago. The octopus was 200 feet across and weighed 5 tons. That's a big octopus. A whale was killed near Seattle, Washington. Inside the whale's stomach was one arm to an octopus. It was 150 feet long. See, whales love to eat octopus. And if a whale eats too much octopus, he'll get sick and puke it back up. And if you ever see a piece of puked up octopus floating around in the ocean, be sure to grab it. It's worth a lot of money. Does anybody know what they make out of puked up octopus? Yes? Oil? Perfume. That explains a few things, doesn't it, fellas? Hey, dear, you smell like a puked up octopus. You know, whales love to eat octopus and squid, but octopus and squid never stop growing. There have been some awfully big squid seen out there in the ocean. Navy research vessel saw a giant squid attacking a giant whale in 1966 off the coast of Newfoundland. At Yale University, they've got the model of a giant squid hanging over my head there, Peabody Museum. This baby giant squid washed up on the beach in New Zealand. They said full grown it would have been 150 feet long. That's a big squid. People say, now wait a minute, if dinosaurs always lived with man, like you're saying, why aren't they mentioned in the Bible? Well, they are. Dinosaurs are in the Bible. Now, the word dinosaur isn't used. That word wasn't made up till later, you know. But they're called other names, which I'll show you. If you get the book of Job, the book of Job has 42 chapters. In the first 2 chapters, it says Job was a perfect man. He feared God and hated evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he had thousands of sheep and camels and oxen and asses. The guy had lots of money. Okay, he was extremely wealthy. And one day the messenger came and said, Job, I have some bad news. All of the oxen and asses were stolen, and your servants all got killed. And by the way, your sheep all got burned up, and the camels got stolen too. Now, Job was having a bad day, called the Hebrew stock market crash. That's where the word stock market comes from, I think. Stock, you know, animals, never mind. Another messenger came and said, Job, guess what? All 10 of your kids just died. Then Satan gave Job boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. And to top it off, his wife turned against him. Job's really having a bad day. God never did tell Job why his kids died. He never did tell him why his livestock was stolen. He never did tell him any of that. All he did was ask him question after question after question. Hey, would you keep serving God if everything went wrong and you never found out why? Job did. We come to chapter 40. And God said, behold now behemoth. Now what on earth is a behemoth? Some reference Bibles say it must be the elephant or hippopotamus. No, it cannot be either of those, okay? I believe behemoth is the long-necked dinosaur, probably the Brachiosaurus. There are actually 13 different long-necked dinosaurs: the Brachiosaur, the Cetosaur, Mamenchosaur, the Seismosaur, the Blondosaurus. You just have to talk to her kind of slow, okay? But God said, behold now behemoth eats grass as an ox. You say, now Brother Hovind, elephants eat grass, and my Bible says elephant. Well, a lot of animals eat grass, okay? Look at the next verse. His strength is in his loins, his force is in the navel of his belly. The biggest part on him is his belly. You say, well, elephants have a big belly. Yep, I've seen them. Hippopotamus have a big belly. I've seen them too. Brachiosaurus has a big belly. He has a big belly. Next verse says, he moveth his tail like a cedar. His tail is like a cedar tree. Have you ever seen an elephant's tail? Not like a cedar tree, is it? How about hippo tail? Not like a cedar tree. You know, before they put those comments about the Bible in the Bible, they ought to at least read it. Don't you think, brother? Before they put a comment about it, they ought at least read it once. You know, it can't be an elephant hippopotamus. They don't have a tail like a cedar tree. I mean, come on. See, the translators in the King James translation did not know a lot about dinosaurs. But this swamp in Africa is 80% unexplored today. Did you know there have been about 30 expeditions into that swamp in the last 20 years? They all come back saying there are dinosaurs still alive. Small ones, probably the Apatosaurus or Cetosaurus, like this one. If you show this to the natives that live in the swamp, they'll say, yep, that's Mokele Mbembe. He still lives in the swamp. When Dr. Mackel showed them a picture of an Apatosaurus, they said, oh, that's Mokele Mbembe. Dr. Mackel said, fellas, that's a dinosaur. They've been dead for 70 million years. And the natives said, we're sorry, we didn't know about that. See, we've never been to America to learn about evolution. All we know is we see them out there in the swamp once in a while. One group got an audio tape of it making a roaring sound, sort of like a gecko lizard makes when its skin flaps out on its throat, and it flaps back. They got 5 minutes of this roaring sound. I've got a tape of it at home somewhere. I haven't been able to locate it for a while. In New Zealand, there's a fishing place off to the right called the, I forget the name of it now, but the water's only 900 feet deep. The rest of the ocean's a lot deeper than that. But the Japanese do a lot of fishing right there. They were dragging their net 900 feet down when they pulled this creature up in their net. It was 32 feet long, 4,000 pounds, and had apparently 4 big flippers. It had a fin running down its back. It smelled horribly. When they set it down on the deck, it broke in half, and pus oozed out everywhere and stunk up the whole boat. And so they said, fellas, we don't know what it is, but we're throwing it back. We're not going to haul this thing back to Japan. You know how far it is from New Zealand to Japan at 12 miles an hour? So they shoved it overboard. But the naturalist on board made a sketch of what he thought it might have looked like. And they even made a special stamp for Japanese mail, 1977. Now, some American scientists who never saw the creature said, well, the samples they took of the skin, and they did save some skin samples, by the way, when they analyzed them, the protein was 96% similar to basking shark. In 1925 in California, This creature washed up on the beach, California's Nessie. I talked to the man who wrote this article, William Roberts. He said, Brother Hovind, it's really strange. I went to Berkeley to the archives, and I got pictures of this creature laying on the beach. There were many excellent photographs of this creature. He said, when I published my article in Skin Diver magazine, 1989, I got so many calls, people said, wow, that's amazing. Do another article. He said, I went back to Berkeley to the archives, and the pictures were gone, and there was no record of them ever existing. Kind of strange. You know, some people really like that evolution theory, and anything that rocks the boat has to be quietly, swept under the rug. But you can see the nose coming down to the bottom of the screen, the eyeball on the right. The guy behind him has a rifle, just in case it moves again. The neck was 20 feet long. And I told you I got that letter from the atheist. He said, you're so dumb, Hovind. Don't you know that was a whale? I just wrote back and said, please show me any neck on a whale. Just exactly where is the neck on a whale. It's not a whale. The people who examined it, like the president of the Natural History Society, said, my examination of the monster was quite thorough. It had no teeth, the head is large, the neck 20 feet long. I would call it a type of plesiosaurus.